What we most need is international collaboration. And the international collaborations that have been enacted through the United Nations, it's important not to give up that fight, but they're not working to date. So we need to try something new. And that's also part of what GTEC and this international friendship is about. So there's a need for international collaboration, and climate change is a question fundamentally and self-evidently of international and global collaboration. Climate change is also a question of international justice. The countries that have done the most harm suffer the least and are at least risk. And the countries that have done the least face the most grievous harm. And this injustice replicates itself on the level of nations and even within cities. So these are questions of international, national, local collaboration and international, local, national justice. So how do we get through it? We come together, as you see these two young women doing it, an action sticker wall at one of our recent shows, and they drew a heart to link their two action stickers together. That sense of community, which we partly gain through the arts, but which we also gain by being together in a room together as well, is how we will be able to move forward. And why are we so behind? It's important to think about this and to reflect on the tragedy of how far behind we are. This is a New York Times front page from 1988, as you can see. As many of us in this room are well aware, Exxon and other big oil companies not only knew about the impact of burning fossil fuels, but actually calculated what the temperature today would be with absolutely astounding accuracy. This is not a problem of intellectual understanding. It's just simply not a problem of the frontal lobe on its own. Why? What keeps us from moving forward? What's prevented us from taking aggressive action to address this long ago, when the problem would have been much easier to resolve? For one thing, climate change isn't a tiger. So if you think about it, 150,000 years ago, it made sense for our entire psychology to be wired to respond to very proximate threats. Climate change poses more of a risk to all of us than that tiger ever could. The tiger can only one of us at a time, just as one example. So there is something that it's important to acknowledge, because there are other reasons that express something darker about our society that we also have to grapple with. But there is also something about evolutionary psychology that makes this a particularly difficult problem to address. Fossil fuel disinformation, an absolutely critical piece of the puzzle. So not only did Exxon know way back when, they've been coming up with disinformation strategies that meet the moment in a way that is almost impressive in its cartoon villainy if it weren't so egregiously, I will say murderously harmful. BP in 2004 brought us the idea of the individual carbon footprint in order to make us feel so complicit in the problem, which was then starting to gain public traction, that we would believe we didn't have an ethical right to raise our voices about it because we were the ones causing it. Because there is no way that you can live in modern society and not exceed your individual carbon allowance. The allowance, in other words, that would allow for Earth to remain in a state of energy stability. Cannot be done. You cannot fly. It's still not going to work. You cannot drive a gas-powered car. You can take away every trapping of modern life. Your individual carbon footprint will still be too big. So if you allow the cartoon villainy, the brilliant cartoon villainy of BP to confuse your morals on this, you will feel that you have no right to speak out. Because if there's only a few things that you all take away from tonight, I really hope that one of them is the idea, is the recognition, that this is not your fault. It's not the fault of the people in this room that we confront the crisis that we confront. That's not to say that it's not a great idea to reduce your carbon footprint when you can. It's absolutely critical to try to do that, of course. And even more important is civic action, and I'll come back to that. But we all have a huge duty to speak out about this, not just a right, because this is not a problem that we created. It's a problem we've been inserted into. Another reason why it's so difficult for us to address this question is that there's a climate silence in our culture. And the GTEC Neighborhood in the 20th Century exhibit and the work that the Climate Museum does and other projects of this nature help break that climate silence. I can't encourage you strongly enough to lean into this and to support it as deeply and as fully as you can. It will make a huge difference. We've actually had a peer review study done by George Mason University of the impact of one of our exhibitions. And we were a little nervous because we see the impact on the floor. We know what happens to people, but it's another thing to hand the information all over so that people can analyze whether the visit to the museum has actually changed outcomes, levels of determination, hope, levels of a sense of resolve, confidence in talking about climate change, all of these different metrics. And we were so delighted when the results came back. And in fact, everything that we see happening in the show shows up in the numbers. So you're committing yourself to becoming part of the GTEC team tonight. You're committing yourself to something that 100% works. We can build a future that is safe and just. You spoke, Pete, about the sense of resignation and of giving up, and that's going to be a temptation at one point or another to everyone in this room. And it's really important to allow yourself fully to feel whatever emotions you might feel about climate change. You may feel despair during some hours, and those hours may stretch out. You will also find yourself feeling hope and joy and resolve if you commit to taking climate action in community with others, and if you support projects like this that will and can change the face of the globe and of what we confront as an international community.